Hi, guys. Welcome to my webinar, to the free webinar. Isn't free nice? I'm so glad that you guys are here with me today. Sorry. Uh, my name is Steve Blum, in case you have no idea who I am and you just happen to drop by. And I've been a voice actor for over 30 years, voicing characters uh, like Wolverine, Spike from Cowboy Bebop, Tom from Toonami, Quentin Thomas from three of hip hop superstar Logic's albums, Zeb from Star Wars Rebels, hundreds of troopers, aliens, other rebels and Imperials from Star Wars games and films, Starscream from Transformers Prime, Shu and Sparky from the Box Trolls movie, Tank Dempsey from Call of Duty, Grunt from Mass Effect, Sub-Zero from Mortal Kombat, and thousands of other characters from anime and video games and original animated TV shows and feature films and commercials, etc., etc., etc. Now, when I started out, I didn't even know that voice acting was a profession. I thought real actors just did it when they didn't have anything else to do. I began in anime, which didn't pay the bills. It was kind of a hidden subset of the voice acting world at the time. But for me, it was fun. I could do it on the weekends. I could learn on the job. And celebrities just didn't want to do it because it didn't pay enough. So I didn't even consider myself to be in the business at that time. To me, it was just an awesome hobby that made me feel good. And eventually I got pretty good at it. But what I accidentally learned from that experience was a great work ethic, a surprisingly useful skill set, and I found camaraderie in the most amazing group of warm, generous, genuine, and monstrously talented people I could possibly imagine. And in the process, I uncovered the building blocks for turning around my issues, my personal issues of self-doubt and lack of self-worth. And I finally found a sense of belonging in a community, in an awesome community. Prior to that, I never felt like I fit in anywhere. I grew up in Los Angeles. It's a huge city, and you have to compete for almost everything here. At least that's the way I used to look at it. For half of my life, I considered myself to be average or below average at basically everything. But it dawned on me one day that after slogging away at a bunch of jobs for years and years and years, just trying to make ends meet, that I had actually gotten pretty good at a few things just from experience. And eventually I was able to do those things for a living. And later on, people started asking me how I did it. So I had to sit down and give it a good hard think. And I had to deconstruct my path to a successful career in this business so that I could share it with others. And guess what, you guys? You are the others in a really, really good way. I know that's usually derogatory, but tonight you are those people that I'm talking about. And I'm going to share some of this with you right now. I keep saying tonight. It's not even tonight, everywhere in the world. I don't know where you're viewing from, but if I say that, forgive me. Today. Once this webinar is done, I'm going to have a gift for you also. It's a free voiceover mini masterclass. It's about 40 minutes long. And it'll hopefully give you some insight into unraveling the mysteries of the business of voiceover. We're going to cover some of it tonight, but that goes more in depth. And the link where this can be found is www.bloomvoxstudios.com. All you have to do is go there, enter your name and email address on that page, and the class is yours, again, for free. So very briefly, here's what I cover in that. Did I mention it's free? Yeah, free class. Number one, I talk about doing voiceover for the love of it. And I would recommend this for pretty much anything that you do creatively. Don't do it to get rich or famous. Even if you do achieve one or both of those things, it won't mean anything if you don't love what you do every day. Number two, I encourage people to take a risk. I truly believe that you can't fully grow or achieve what your potential would allow without taking risks. You have to do it. You have to scare yourself sometimes. Do stuff that puts you out of your comfort zone. Number three, I talk about the notion that failure is success. Now, if you talk to any successful person, they will tell you that they have failed way more than they have succeeded in their life. So why not embrace that? Failure is part of the process. So it's not necessarily a bad thing unless you make it that. Number four, looking stupid. Now, In voiceover, we have to be available to the idea that we're not going to look pretty when we're at the microphone. That's okay. We didn't care about that when we were kids. The problem is when we grow up, we forget how to play. And that's one of the most important things to remember when you are being a voice actor is to remember that sense of play, remember that sense of fun. Number 5 is all about listening. Now, I cannot overemphasize the underestimated value of the art of listening. I'm going to leave that there for you to chew on that for a minute, but listening is critical to this business, as it is in many, many areas of the arts or in everywhere else. Listening is a good thing. Number 6, training. So many people who are interested in voice acting forget about the acting part. They just want to do the silly voices. They just want to play. The play part is great, but you have to have the acting training too. It's very, very important. And we'll go into that in a little more detail later. We talk about equipment. What do you need to get started? What kind of equipment do you need? Some people think they have to make this huge investment in mics and a fancy recording booth and stuff. You don't really need all that when you're beginning, and we'll talk about that in this mini masterclass. Number 8, we do discuss the demo reel. What needs to be on it? How long should it be? When are you ready to do it? All of those questions will be answered in there. Number 9 is marketing. Unlike many other types of businesses, you are the product. You are selling yourself. And so you have to come to terms with the fact that you are at some point going to have to market yourself. It can make or break your career, depending on how you do it. And the great news is that you guys have so many options to market yourself that we didn't have when I was doing this. We had to mail stuff to market ourselves. We had to make up little packages and actually put them in the mail, physically mail these things. You guys have social media now. You guys have YouTube. You have all these different marketing things available to you. So we'll discuss that too. And the last thing that we're going to talk about in that class is the next step. So what can you do today to actually get started in voiceover? Pretty good for a free class, right? So check that out. After this is all over, we'll give you the link again in case you missed it, and you can go there. Anyway, that's my gift to you. I've been teaching live voiceover classes for a while now, and we've been getting a lot of valuable feedback from my students about what their favorite classes were so far, so that I could give you a little taste here and now of the best stuff. The most popular class of all we found by vote was called Making Friends with Your Voice. And this class is all about coming to terms with the fact that you are a unique individual. A critical factor in doing this work is figuring out who you are and being okay with that. And very early on, I used to hate my voice. I couldn't stand it. I couldn't stand to hear myself talk when I heard recordings back, even on my answering machine. Until one day that I actually realized I could use it for so many more things than my little brain would even imagine at that time. It's kind of become a hidden superpower. And not just in voiceover, in relationships, in negotiating, and in life. You have to be able to use your voice. But what makes you unique? One of my taglines is unleash your voice. But you can't do that if you don't know what that voice is, or if you're not willing to let it out once you have discovered that. So how do you do that? Well, I always say it's like going back to the sandbox. To play like you did when you were a kid. You're going to hear that a lot from me. When you didn't care about how you looked. Your main goal was fun and discovery and being creative. That's all you really cared about. And maybe food and, getting to the bathroom on time. But those were your main objectives as a kid. The first few classes of my series are about getting you to a place where you're not stifled by what you think other people think of you. Now take that in for a minute. You might be obsessed with what you have decided other people think about you. That's only what you think other people think about you. Why do you even pay attention to that stuff? It's only in your mind. You can't decide what they're going to think about you anyway. So once you get past that and you don't let that be a burden to you, that is the essence of confidence, which coincidentally is the next most popular subject in my classes and was one of the hardest things for me to deal with in my journey. So how do you build confidence? Well, I struggled with that for many years. I found that for me, it starts by being willing to play, unencumbered by what you look like when you're doing it or what your thoughts are of how people perceive you. You've got to get the voices out of your head that have been telling you that you're not good enough or that you look stupid if you do that, or that you just can't be you because somewhere down the line, somebody told you this nonsense and you accepted it and you internalized it as truth. And now you tell yourself that unknowingly, reinforcing that unnecessary, inaccurate garbage lie every day. You need to shed all that stuff. It keeps you from having fun and from becoming fully self-expressed, and it's not even real. You inherently are a creative being. Remembering how to have fun and to have the courage to be creative is one of the hardest challenges we face as adults. You have so much to offer, and it's really become my goal to help you realize that potential. I want everybody to be able to realize that potential. We'd just be much happier human beings if we can. And one of the most overlooked aspects of voiceover is the physicality of it, including the importance of warm-ups and cool downs and vocal care. You need to have easy, practical vocal workouts that can help you to get your voice in shape and to keep it healthy. You can cause permanent damage when you're doing vocally stressful work if you don't take care of your instrument and learn how to use it properly. So in one of my classes, I gave a short guided meditation to help my students relax and get centered. I know from personal experience that meditation has physical healing properties. Because I meditate every day, I have for a long time, and I highly recommend it to everyone. It's probably the thing that keeps me sane when everything else goes wonky and things do a lot in this business. Anyway, my students loved that particular class so much that I wrote an extended guided meditation, and I did it live in class with them. I hope that no matter where your journey takes you, that you take the time once in a while, hopefully once a day at least or more, to still your mind. Just find quiet, whether it's through meditation or some other modality. It can really help you to reset. Recently, we did an entire class on taking direction, and we brought in Mary Elizabeth McGlynn, one of the most sought after voice directors in the business, to show you what it's like to be directed in the booth. And she voice directed over 500 episodes of Naruto, the entire Cowboy Bebop series and the movie, Tangled the series, the new She-Ra series, Star Wars Resistance, and dozens of others. So to get direction directly from somebody with her experience was an incredible night. It was something that a lot of us really aren't exposed to because we work by ourselves in our booths. And one of the great things that she shared was that a lot of new actors think that if they can't nail it on the first take, that they'll blow their opportunity and they'll never get called back. So many people have built up so much fear around this that it's stopped them from moving forward. This class showed that no matter what level you're at, you're gonna need guidance at some point. And most of us need guidance most of the time when we're doing this work. And you can learn how to take that guidance well and to do something wonderful with it, while still maintaining your unique flavor, even if the read that they're asking for isn't what you expected, which, by the way, happens a lot. Now, it's always important to me to give practical, real-time advice from experts who do this every day. So when I share this stuff with you guys, I've actually not only done this from personal experience, but I'm taking it from the experts whose advice I've followed for many, many years. Now, the number one thing that engineers ask me to help my students with is microphone technique. They beg me to tell you guys about this. Technique will differ as much as the microphones themselves. And there are quite a few different types of microphones: dynamic, condenser, shotgun, ribbon, USB versus XLR. Don't worry if that makes absolutely no sense to you right now. It will later, and you may not even need to know about that because generally most studios handle that for you, except for the one that you have at home. Now, professional mics range in price from about $100 to $20,000. And what you actually need right now might not be very expensive at all. I don't want you overspending when you're shopping for equipment. It's just something to think about, so put a pin in that. Anyway, back to the microphone technique itself. This is critical to your experience in the studio and for everyone you work with in the studio. Good technique makes the session move faster, you get better quality takes, and once you have your technique down, you don't have to think about it, and you can concentrate on fully inhabiting your character and bringing it to life, bringing it off the page. Good mic technique can affect your relationships and your reputation with studio personnel, even your longevity in this business. Because if you're good, they'll remember you. They'll want to work with you, and they'll actually refer you for other work later on down the line. I also talk about what to wear in the studio, and more importantly, what not to wear. Uh, because studio microphones are incredibly sensitive. They pick up everything: jewelry, breaths, belches, even the fabric of your clothing matters. You don't want to have to take off your warm, wonderful layers in a cold studio, especially if you don't have enough layers to cover you. And I've seen this happen. I've actually seen this happen so they can get through a session. And FYI, nylon is not your friend. So take that off of your list for studio wear. It just makes a lot of noise when it rubs against itself. Being able to do efforts and reactions like yelling and grunting and fighting, etc., and how not to blow out the mic, the engineer's ears, the director's ears, or your own voice while you're doing that kind of work. Another very, very important component of mic technique. And seemingly obvious, but not surprisingly not to a lot of people, is how to move in front of the mic. For example, you need to be aware of what your feet are doing when you're pretending to do things like running as your character. The mic is always listening, and it's going to pick up the lovely rhythmic stomping of your feet. And that's great for stage, but not so much for voiceover. They can't isolate that away from what they're recording, the necessary stuff, when they're recording the necessary stuff from your mouth. So you don't want your feet taking center stage. Also important is finding your best possible sound in your home recording situation. That involves experimenting with your own mic, your studio, and your voice to find your personal sweet spot for the best quality recordings for sessions when you are the engineer at home. And you will be doing a lot of that once you get into this work. Most auditions are done from home, and a lot of broadcast stuff is done from home. So at some point, you're going to have to get used to recording yourself, and you're going to have to tune your own room. You're going to have to get familiar with the equipment. So let's talk about preparing for the unexpected. That was also a very, very popular topic. It's super important, especially for folks who like to be in control. You know who you are. And for those who think that they've mastered it all, especially you young people. I know a lot of you think you've got this wired. It's okay. Take that into the studio with you, and then I'll show you how to let that go. But a huge part of mastering the art of voiceover includes mastering the art of surrender, letting go of your preconceived notions of how things should be according to you. Also, it's a valuable life lesson. Letting go, you can reduce a lot of stress that way. We put way too much pressure on ourselves with that kind of perfectionism. Collaboration will be necessary as a voice artist, and letting go of your ego and allowing a possible paradigm shift where everything doesn't have to go your way for you to make it your own, not only can be super helpful in the booth, but can actually be life-changing, way beyond voiceover. So consider it. It's important to listen carefully also when curveballs are thrown your way. What will you do when you've prepared in every possible way? You have your script ready, you've walked into the booth, and the director hands you an entirely new script. Your character's been changed, maybe even the dialect is different. Nothing you studied the night before applies anymore. Oh my God, WTF, it's panic time, right? Not necessarily. Hopefully not. Breathing is a good idea for starters. That in itself is its own class. But people, remember to breathe. If you get into one of these situations in the studio, just remember to breathe. It's not a life and death situation here. But if you also learn to master your listening skills, you'll get critical information that will help you to overcome anything that's thrown at you. And you might actually enjoy the new spontaneous opportunity that you've just been handed. Improv will help you with this also. Concentration is also essential to be able to listen and process and utilize every detail of what's being discussed in the room regarding your character. Rather than be intimidated and shut down by having to do something you weren't prepared for, you can actually transform that moment into an opportunity to exercise your creativity and perhaps even create a whole new character. And by the way, you could add that to your reel for more potential work later on down the line. So it really could be a blessing to put yourself through that situation. That's part of taking a risk. Now, I'm often asked about the differences between voice acting for anime versus video games versus original animation. I've done a lot of all of it. Even if you're not interested in anime, learning the notations and symbols on dubbing scripts and how they relate to the screen in real time is a valuable skill that'll benefit you in more ways than I can express in this business. In my classes, we go over how the dubbing process works, the importance of timing, and even learning how to read time code, which is becoming a lost art. And it's kind of a shame. It's a great skill to have if you ever do background voices, also known as looping for TV and film. Some people make their whole living and a very, very good living doing only that. Other than that, acting is acting is acting. It's all the same thing. The biggest differences really just occur in the setup of the sessions themselves. In anime and most video games, you work by yourself in the booth. In a lot of original animation, you get to work with a cast, so you get to play off of their energy. Really, really fun to do. You still have to pay attention, but it's really, really fun to do, and it just changes the dynamic in the room. But the acting itself really is the same. The only other difference is in video games, you might have a lot more to do in a 4-hour session. You might have 1,000 lines in a 4-hour session rather than 40 lines in a 4-hour session. But as I said in the very beginning of this, acting is critical to the voice acting thing, okay? Hydration is important. That's why I just took a drink. Anyway, so before we go to your questions, I have some questions for you. First, the most important question, and this is kind of an esoteric question and a global question for you, is what do you want? I didn't actually ask myself this question until I was about 40 years old. What do you want? You can apply it to voiceover, you can apply it to anything. But I want you to ask yourself that question first as you're thinking about going into voice acting. Now I'll get a little more specific, okay? Why are you here in this webinar? Personally, I'm really glad you're here, but I want you to ask yourself these things. Are you thinking about voiceover because you want to create? You want to find something to express yourself creatively? Are you doing it because voices are just fun for you? Cool. Do you have a long-term goal in this? Do you want to be a voice actor as your profession? Do you want to do this as something that fulfills you and makes you feel good because you're in a crappy job that doesn't make you feel alive? There really are no right or wrong answers. It's really just the one that best reflects you and where you are right now. And hopefully inspires you to go after what really does make you happy, whether it's voiceover or something else. That's what I call the inner game. I believe it's always best to know your why before you start learning the how. You got to build the inner support system first, or everything else is going to topple when things get tough. It's your foundational stuff. These classes are designed to do just that, to help you to develop an internal support system that will carry you through everything this crazy, amazing voiceover world has to offer and or will throw at you. And believe me, it will throw a bunch of stuff at you that you will not expect. Now, you can go it alone and learn in the school of hard knocks like I did, and maybe take decades to do it. Cool. Or you may be able to do it faster and hopefully more joyfully with a little help. And I think I can help you because I've already been there. And by the way, it's supposed to be fun. So remember that joyfully part. I want you guys to have fun when you're learning this. It's not digging through a textbook like a history class. It's supposed to be fun. Now, as promised, I'd like to take some questions. And I'm already seeing a ton of you in here. So I know I'm not going to get to all of your questions today, but yours might actually get answered via someone else's question. So this often happens in classes with our students. So go ahead and fire away. And please hang out until the end because some of the most amazing learning moments could happen right now in the process of the Q&A. So let me get over to that here. Technology. Hello, technology. Okay, cool. All right. So first question I see comes from Corey Phillips. Hi, Corey. I've been doing Walla and Bits and some roles at Funimation. Good for you. What things should I be doing to help me move to larger roles? I've been in the game for 2 years now. Well, great that you're working in anime. I would assume you're doing anime if it's Funimation. Man, that's a big question. Some of the stuff that you could be doing right now to move to larger roles would really be your research. I would work on your skill set. Make sure that you are able to um, think on your feet. Improv classes would be very, very helpful for that. Uh, in my classes, I offer a lot of exercises that you can do to kind of stretch yourself out, stretch your range out, try different dialects. But most important of all is really just to make sure that your acting skills are sharp. Sometimes in anime, and I don't know what shows that you've been working on, um, you can get away with a little bit more than you can in original animation because you are bound to the script that was written before. So you work in that context. But to stretch that out, it's really great to maybe even get involved in community theater or some way that you can have a little more control over the character. And then you can dig a little bit deeper into it and just expand yourself out. And in terms of just moving to larger roles, I would assume that you're talking about original animation. And I don't know how much of that exists where you are, honestly. You kind of have to be where that work is, and that would be Los Angeles. But do everything that you can where you are now, including theater, including improv. Uh, Reading to kids is also something I highly suggest because they're a great audience and they're going to give you honest feedback. So just sink your teeth in everywhere and anywhere that you can. Uh, Next one comes from Sarah. Hi, Sarah. My question, what is your favorite or most successful way to develop new characters, especially on the spot? That's a great question. I'm a very organic actor, and I began, my very first job was in a comic book shop. My grandfather owned a bookstore, and my very first job was sorting comics as a 12-year-old kid. And new characters, the voices for the new characters actually just popped into my head. As I read copy or if I see an image of a character, I allow that voice to sort of formulate inside my head. Uh, some people try to squash that down and they try to force a character into being something that it's not. I always go from the intuitive place first. I would think that if you're like me, when you're reading a book or you're looking at a magazine or if you're reading a comic book, these things will come to mind automatically. Go there first and try it. Just do the first thing that pops out of your mind. A good example of that for me was Wolverine. When I first had the opportunity to read for Wolverine, I knew what had been done before me. I knew who the actors were who had played Wolverine before. Um, but when they're casting for a character, especially a legacy character like that, they want to hear something that's a little bit different. So I just did that voice that came to me when I read the comic. And fortunately, I was old enough at that point to do it. When I was younger reading the comics, Wolverine would probably kind of come out like that. But later on, it came out like this, back off, bub. And it just happened to be the voice that they were hearing in their heads too. The producers were hearing that voice too. So start there. Don't squelch that. If you have something intuitively that comes to mind, go with that first and start to develop it there. And especially if you have a director there, they'll pull you away from it if you're way off base or if they want you to play against type or something like that. But go by the description. Read the description very carefully too. That's a mistake that a lot of new actors make when they're reading copy. Sometimes we'll get 2 pages of description of the character, and then you get like 3 lines of copy for the character. And the instinct, especially if you have a big pile of stuff that you have to get through in one night, is to just kind of breeze through all that stuff. Read it really carefully because there might be nuggets of information in there that really inform how you structure that character, the age, the body type, how the character moves if there's some sort of injury that they might have, dialect. All of those things matter. So make sure that you just read the specs for it too. That'll be very helpful for you. Next one is from Silvana. Silvana says, how did you learn to edit your voiceover work? The hard way. Uh, Man, that was a big learning curve for me. I use Pro Tools, and I have been using Pro Tools for a very, 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 very long time. The learning curve was gigantic for me in the very beginning, and I know very little about the capacity of Pro Tools. I see real engineers using Pro Tools to its fullest capabilities, and it just blows my mind. I have no idea what they're doing. You don't really need to know that much. And now you have the benefit of tutorials too, which I didn't have back then. You can go on YouTube and you can get a tutorial in how to use any of these formats. You mentioned Pro Tools, GarageBand, Audacity, etc. Yeah, they're really, really great tutorials for that. And I still have a lot of problems with Pro Tools. Pro Tools is notorious for um, going down sometimes and having all sorts of issues. Um, this week I had to fix 2 issues in it, and I just went online and I followed the tutorial, and many times it's like a 12 to 16-year-old kid who's teaching me how to do this stuff. So trust them. They know what they're doing. Okay, the next one comes from Jeremy. Hi, Jeremy. In all seriousness, what's your take on using method acting to do voiceovers? Well, I am not a method actor. I never had classical training. That said, when I am doing fight scenes, I have been told that I actually do all of the physical moves of the fighter in that moment. Man, I was just watching an interview with somebody recently, and they were talking about how it was so weird to watch me because I looked like a flailing sock puppet or something, and my head would stay directly on mic. But I will, if I'm in a fight scene, I will throw every punch that you see on camera. I will throw every kick. I'm going to take that punch. I'm going to internalize it. If I'm slammed in the face, I'm going to feel that pain to the point where at the end of a session, sometimes I am so sore, it takes me a couple days to recuperate. So whatever works for you in that, the only thing that I would suggest you don't do too much is over-rehearse. And a lot of method actors tend to over-rehearse, and they go into the booth, and that to me takes away from a performance. You really want to get that authentic read, especially on your first take. So just be cautious about that if you are a method actor. Don't let it control you. You have to be able to be in control. Next one comes from Terrell. Hi, Terrell. Terrell says, hey, hi, Steve. My question is for someone that has the ability to make various sound effects relative to that of Michael Winslow, where would you suggest they start in regards to building a demo? Wow, if you can do that, there are very, very few people who are really, really good at that. So awesome. Where would I suggest you start in regards to building a demo? Make sure that you have acting chops too, because yes, you might get hired as a specialist to do that, but you have to be able to do everything else too. I don't know anybody who bases their career solely on effect sounds like that. Maybe you can. I don't know. If you're that good, you might be able to. In terms of building the demo, it would be like building any other demo. I would say you get probably 10 of your strongest effects and start practicing those. And still, even if it is just effect sounds, I would have a professional demo producer do it, and don't do it until you really have all of your other acting chops together, because chances are if you get hired for that, they're going to want you to do other things in the booth too. Most jobs that you will get hired for, especially union jobs, they want you to do at least 3 characters, and in non-union jobs, they might have you do 10 characters. So you have to be prepared for that. You can't just rely on the sound effects. It's a great question though. I hope you can do that, because we could use more Michael Winslows in this business, I think. He's just genius. Next one comes from Jake. Being typecast in the work I have done, what is a good way to learn how to gain more range? I can only assume that, well, no, I can't assume that. A lot of people are typecast on camera because you are a type, and they will judge you on that. When you're just doing voice acting, yeah, you might get stuck in a pocket for a while. I was typecast for a while as the guy with the one voice. I had the deep voice. I could do creatures. That's all anybody thought of me for. What it really is just a waiting game. You have to stay in the game long enough so that you can get in front of people and show them the other things that you can do. To learn how to gain more range is really just practice, 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 practice. You have to stretch yourself, put yourself into a place where you're uncomfortable. One of the things that I did very early on was to read children's books. I went to my kids' schools and I read children's books, and tried to act out all the voices, even if I couldn't do it very well. And the great thing was reading for kids, there was no pressure about, people paying me to do it. I didn't really worry if I screwed it up. But the great thing was that the kids were super honest, and they would tell me if I wasn't doing it right, and they would become my directors. They would get me into that place. And sometimes they would even do the voice for me, and I would copy a 6-year-old kid's version of that character, and it would help me to stretch myself out. Another thing that you can do is just grab a piece of copy, anything that you have laying around the house, a novel or a magazine, and try a bunch of voices. Just read something that would normally be a very straight piece of copy, even if it's directions to build something. Read that as though you were a 3-pound hamster. Just try stuff out. Don't be afraid to look ridiculous. And, you might want to do it by yourself at first, so that you aren't feeling inhibited, but just stretch yourself out. Make goofy faces while you're doing it too. Stretch out the parts of your face that you haven't used before in your voice work, and just see if that makes a difference. D. Bradley Baker, a dear friend of mine, actually uses his sinuses. He manipulates his sinuses to get different sounds out of his face. So try everything that you have at your disposal. You are an instrument. So just play around and learn how to play that instrument. And after a while, you learn through muscle memory where those voices will appear as you constrict and relax your throat. When I began in the early days, I wasn't sure what would come out until I actually opened my mouth, and then I would have to sort of redirect myself. And now, after doing it for so long, like I was saying before, practice, repetition, it becomes second nature. And you'll be surprised at how fast your range can grow. So good luck with that. I hope that helped you. Next up is Justin. Many clients are asking for at-home recording, production, processing, and delivery. How do you recommend someone in that situation self-direct their performance? And are there any resources for making a more polished, finished product when we don't have the benefit of a director and editor? That's a very good question, and part of that is really out of my scope. I don't produce or process my tracks. The only at-home recording production that I do that really goes to broadcast is Toonami. And basically, I just clean up the tracks and give them to them as clean as I can. No processing at all. I deliver them to them. I do take out the breaths and I kind of consolidate everything, but I don't have to process. I don't have to do that for delivery. If you're talking about like imaging for radio, sometimes they require that. That's out of my skill set. So I don't want to BS you for something that I don't know about. I think the best thing to do would really start looking around on YouTube, because there are people that do that full time, and they could give you a lot of more complete answer than I could there. And in terms of working without a director, that's a tough thing to do. One thing that I would suggest you do is take some classes where you do work with a director, and the director will kind of teach you a method of direction. After a while, when you take classes long enough, you're going to hear the same things. The director is going to be giving you the same notes, and take all of that down, take all of it in. And when you find yourself getting into those situations where you could improve something with one of those notes, just start using it on yourself. But I think that the only way that you can really get that input is by either being directed or taking classes where directors are present. And then you have that outside source. But again, that's probably available online too. And like I mentioned earlier in the class, that I do bring in directors. I'm going to be bringing in directors in the future in my classes for that very reason. George asks, how did you get past your stage fright? Man, just doing it long enough, I think. Sometimes I still do get it. It just depends. It depends on the day. It depends on the project. I think I just have to trust myself. I was talking a little bit earlier about building confidence. And what works for me more than anything else is remembering that the people on the other side of the glass want you to do well. I think so many new actors go into the booth and they get freaked out and they think, oh no, they're judging me on the other side of the glass. I can't hear what they're thinking. I can't understand what they're saying. They're talking to each other. I'm sure they're talking about me. Chances are they're ordering lunch. Let all that stuff go and just go there to play with the people on the other side of the glass. They're fun people. or they wouldn't be making cartoons or commercials or whatever else. They're creatives. And remember that they're creatives, and remember that they want you to do well. So just come there and play. And if you mess up, you mess up. You try it again. The beauty is that they have digital recording capability now. They don't have to actually cut tape. They can do another take. So you don't have to worry about all that stuff. Take the pressure off of yourself. And also, by the time that you get into the booth and you're recording in a professional situation, chances are, hopefully, you've had some training. And that training alone, just the repetition of the training alone, will help you to deal with the stage fright. So don't let it stop you. Don't let it stop you from doing this. It's actually better if you are afraid and you work through the fear. I was talking before about fear of failure. I'm afraid often. And I find that my biggest breakthroughs come when I am most fearful and I'm willing to do it anyway. So just do it anyway, okay? Next question comes from Jack. Hi, Jack. What is the best way to practice/hone your voice acting skill? To practice/hone your voice acting skills? Uh, it really is just practicing. There's so much available online. Again, you can find complete scripts to movies and TV shows online, and you can just practice them. At first, emulate the people who are doing it, just to give you a little bit of context, and then break away from that and use your own unique voice. Start with your unique voice. Don't even try to put a character voice on it. Read the copy. Deliver it as authentically as you possibly can. One thing that I recommend is that you record yourself. Just get a piece of copy online and record yourself doing it. And when you listen back, do it from an objective place. Maybe even give yourself a full day before you listen the first time, because you'll be coming back to it with fresh ears. And when you listen back, close your eyes and just imagine, do I believe this guy? It's as simple as that. You want to be authentic. That's the most important ingredient to all of this, is authenticity. So just practice being you. And that part is actually harder than you think. So start there. Once you conquer that, all the characters and stuff, that's just building blocks that you put on. The foundation is really you and finding the most authentic version of you. So start there. Savannah has another question here. Oh, is that right? Yes. Okay. I live in an apartment in New York City. How can I block out noise? I don't have enough money yet for a full studio. I have a Scarlett Studio microphone and headphones, and I use Focusrite to adjust the gain. This is a problem for a lot of people. One thing that I do, I tend to do a lot of recording when I'm on the road. I do a lot of conventions. I do about 30 conventions a year, and I bring a little recording rig with me. And though this won't necessarily be convenient at first for your apartment, you can alter this little setup very easily, and I'm sure that you can figure out how to do this. But what I do in my hotel room is I'll take 3 pillows and I will set them up like a U shape, and I will put another pillow up on top, and so I have like a little cave. And then I take a comforter and I throw it over my head, and all of a sudden I have a fully treated sound studio. It blocks out much more sound than you can possibly imagine. It gets really hot under there, so make sure that you take breaths. But you will be surprised at how good the sound is. And I do that. I've done that all over the world. If it's uncomfortable for you to be doing that on a bed, the nice thing about the bed is that the bottom of your little cave is also padded. You want that padded too. If you have a closet with an open shelf, put a towel or a pillow or something on the shelf, a couple more pillows, or tack up a little bit of foam on the sides and on the top, and build yourself like a little cave. You want to isolate a little box where you can control the sound. And then if there's a lot of sound coming from behind you and you have a microphone that seems to be picking that up, you can, throw something over your head. Even a jacket works. If you have a jacket with a hood, throw that over, and just so it has a little bit of a sound baffle behind you. There's a lot of different ways that you can treat the sound. It's not the most comfortable way to do it, but if you're in that situation, chances are you're only going to be recording for, at the most an hour a day with your auditions and whatever jobs you might be working from home to. So just make sure, like I said, make sure that you take breaks and you breathe, because it might get hot in there. And don't forget to hydrate also. Just reminded myself I'm going to hydrate too, because I'm talking like it's going out of style. Okay, next up is John. John asks, I'm new to VO. Welcome. I've only been at it a year with no success and close to 600 auditions. Great. I'll tell you why in a minute. I'm listening to my auditions. I'm constantly sounding robotic, flat, and lifeless. Any tips for breaking this habit, or does it just come with experience? But how to get experience without landing gigs? Classes are really helpful. Honestly, classes are really, really helpful, especially if you're in a live class situation, to break you out of that. One of the things that I've used before is just scream or sing or dance or do something physical before you sit down at the mic. Sometimes we tend to sit there and we get too hyper focused on it. You're overthinking it. Really, is what the problem is. So you have to break that uh, overthinking cycle. That's what gets you into that robotic place, the flat, lifeless place, because you're reading it. It's going to sound reedy. You want authenticity. To get authenticity, you have to be able to speak these lines as though you're speaking to a friend in your room. If you can't imagine that yet, you will with practice. Don't worry about that. 600 auditions, yep, that's a lot, but it's also practice. The great thing is that you're doing it anyway. Even though you've been dissatisfied with it up to this point, you're doing it anyway. So good for you for pushing through that. But now you just have to find a way to break it up. So the next time you do one of these auditions, do the first one like that, listen back to it. If it's sounding robotic, take a breath immediately, step away from it, do 20 jumping jacks, come back to it, or scream or sing some stupid song, the song that you hate the most, just something to shake up your brain and get those cobwebs out of there so that you don't hyper focus on that and don't over rehearse it. I would suspect that you're probably rehearsing these things to death. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but many times that's what causes this too, is that people over rehearse it and they get overly conscious of what they think it sounds like. And then it ends up sounding flat. So take that pressure off yourself and have fun. And I would also suggest maybe taking an improv class. Improv is one of those great experiences where you don't have time to overthink anything. You just have to say yes and when they ask you to do something and you go. And it can't sound flat when you're doing that because you're constantly coming up with something and it's going to be an organic process. It's going to be a spontaneous process. And that's what we need to get into you is more spontaneity. So, and don't forget to have fun, please. Just don't forget to have fun. Go out and do something fun. You know, if you get stuck in one of these things, even if you've tried all these things and you're still stuck in it, go do something that you'll love to do. Go play with an animal. Go to the park. Go see a movie or something and come back to it when you're feeling better, when you've done something that fills up your soul. And then you come back to that and you're feeling good and it'll be more of an organic process. Next up, we have Ty. Hi, Ty. Thanks for joining us. Ty says, hey, Steve, this might be the purpose of the webinar, but do you have any advice for someone who wants to voice act as a career who does not live in an area with many voiceover opportunities? Sure. First of all, you can do this from anywhere in the world. Now, you may not be able to do AAA video game titles or big movies or, top end original animated programming, but there are a million different ways to get into voiceover. There's so many different types of voiceover out there that you can do from anywhere in the world. I couldn't do that when I came into this business. I was stuck with whatever was available in my city. So there's a lot that you can do where you are. And people do cast for stuff online too. I'm seeing it all the time. I'm seeing it every day now on Facebook and Twitter. People are casting for their projects. And a lot of them are paid things, non-union paid things, but they're paid things. So don't worry so much that you're in an area where you think there aren't a lot of opportunities because you're on this globe. And as long as you're on this globe, there are opportunities. And they will happen worldwide too. I have friends who do voices for well-known cartoon characters in Singapore. They just happen to do that version for that, and and they're making a great living doing that. You might be able to do industrials from where you are. You might be able to do local commercials from where you are, narration, audiobooks. There's a whole bunch of different things that you can do. And once you do everything that you can from that place, if you start making a career out of it, if you start making money out of it, or if you've got a backup plan financially that will support you and your chops are really, really solid and you are absolutely ready for the AAA markets, that's when you move to a place like LA and make sure you've got your backup plan. But then you can start auditioning there in the bigger leagues and get an agent and all that stuff. But I never recommend anybody even do that until you've exhausted every possibility locally and online first. Okay. Next up comes from Andrew. And Andrew says, typically when people ask questions regarding VO, they look towards animation, US or Japanimation, or video games. I'm rather interested in the commercial setting. Good. What would be the largest differences in the way that you would approach a commercial versus those more well-recognized paths? Well, like I was saying before, acting is acting is acting. The most important ingredient of that is authenticity. You want people to believe you. When you are talking about a product, you want people to believe you. You want to give an authentic read, as authentic as you possibly can. And that just comes with training. So once you really, really get your training down there, you market yourself a little bit differently for commercials. That's really a whole class. I don't even have time to go into that right now. Commercials are a little bit of a different animal, and generally speaking, they can be kind of formulaic as opposed to animation. But one of the things that you can do right now is start studying how commercials are sounding now. There is, I think it's called iSpot.tv, something like that. And they have a listing of all the different kinds of commercials from all the different companies, the biggest companies that are putting them out right now. And start studying what the actors are doing on those commercials. And listen very closely. Again, this is one of those instances where you can close your eyes and listen to the performance, especially if it's a TV commercial, and decide whether or not you believe that actor. And find the ones that are authentic to your ear. Generally, in a TV commercial, it's going to be more of a subtle performance. In radio, because you only have the voice to work with and they're imagining everything else, the performance is going to be a little more driven out there. They're going to be projecting a little bit louder and perhaps less authentic. But the best voice actors in commercials are going to be the ones that can still do that and give you an authentic performance that is believable. So start there. And again, there's a ton of stuff online available for that. We also do a class on commercials in my series, my webinar series. How are we doing on time? Let's see. Okay, we're getting there. I'm going to take 3 more questions and then we'll wrap up here. The next one comes from Nicholas. Nicholas says, how do you recommend rediscovering that sense of play? That's a great question. One thing that you can do right now is, if you are like me, you're probably a little bit of a nerd, or you've got a little bit of that nerd side in you. And if you have action figures in your house, I don't know if you do, but if you do, pull a couple action figures off the shelves, make them have a conversation with each other, just like you would when you were a little kid. And don't worry how ridiculous you look when you're doing it. If you don't have that, grab 2 little items, inanimate objects that you have in your house, give them each a voice, give them each a personality, imagine that each has lived an entire life, and let them have a conversation. Do the voices for them, and let go of what you look like, let go of what you even sound like in that moment. Just play. Do something that you haven't done since you were a little kid. Maybe you've got an old game that's laying around. Maybe you've got a buddy who you used to play a game with, Chutes and Ladders or something you used to play as a small child. Pull it out, play, just play. People just refuse to play. Part of the problem, I think, with a lot of us grown-ups is that we just refuse to play because we think it's being immature or whatever. Forget all that stuff. Play, have fun. I don't know if you noticed, but Dungeons and Dragons has come back in a huge way. There's this thing called Critical Role, if you're not familiar with it, where a bunch of grown-ups are playing Dungeons and Dragons in front of gigantic audiences because they want to watch grown-ups play. This is the best time in history, I think, for you to do this. So let go of any judgment you might have had around playing as an adult, and just do it. Just give yourself permission to do that. Shay, forgive me if I'm mispronouncing this. Uh, I don't know if this has been asked, but what equipment do you need to start out as a voice actor? Your voice. Really, that's the only equipment you need in the very beginning. Like I was saying before, there's so much available to you online. Most people have some sort of smartphone or some sort of device that has a recording capability in it. In the very beginning, you don't need anything. Just start recording into your device, whatever that is. Pick up a piece of copy, something that you have laying around the house, or find a little piece of script online and just start reading out loud and then listening back. And again, just see if you believe it. That's the very first step. Uh, Read to kids, read to your family. One thing that I did over the holidays this year is we pulled out a copy of Christmas Carol, and we sat and we read it out loud. I had never read that book out loud before. It was amazing, and we sucked at the dialects. We weren't even good at it, but it was really fun, and it also awakened that sense of play. Do that with people that you love. It's actually a really great way to interact with people, so you're not sitting around on your phones all the time. You know, instead of watching a movie one night, sit around with your buddies and read something out loud. It's a great way to start. And then there are, 3,000 other steps beyond that, but you really don't need equipment to begin with. And I think that's a big mistake that a lot of people make, is they think they need to invest in stuff right away, and they spend too much money on a class right away. You don't really need to do that. You don't have to spend hundreds or thousands of dollars on a class in the very beginning. It's just not necessary. There's so much that you can do on your own and so much that's available online. And the whole reason I designed my classes is to give an affordable alternative to that, so that you don't have to put yourself in debt just to start what may turn out to be a hobby for you. It's cool if you take it on and make a profession out of it later on. Most people don't. That's okay. But to have something like this in your life, a great creative outlet in your life, doesn't cost a dime. You can do it right now today. Last question for tonight. That was 3, I think. Comes from Alex. Steve, how long should a typical warm-up and cool down take? As long as it takes for you. Every person is an individual. I can't tell you how long it's going to take for you. For me, if I wake up really, really groggy, I need to do warm-ups for maybe 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, something like that. Some people, it takes them an hour of warm-ups. I've seen people who are doing it for a very long time, and before they get to a session, they'll show up half an hour, 45 minutes early, and I see them in the parking lot doing scales and singing and doing, all that stuff that you learn in traditional acting class. And that's what works for them. So your instrument is unique, so I can't tell you how your instrument is going to function. But you just do it till things loosen up a little bit, till it feels a little bit more natural coming out, and to the point where you're able to articulate if necessary. So, if they throw something at you like available for limited time only at participating dealers, terms, conditions, and restrictions apply. If you have to do something like that, you have to warm up the apparatus first. And you'll know, because if you try to do that and you're not warmed up, it's just going to come out like mush. Okay, so that's it for the questions tonight, guys. I really have to wrap this up. I just want to go over a couple quick things with you before we say goodbye. I don't know what just happened here. Technology. There we go. Oh dear, something happened. Something happened. I don't know what happened here. Okay. Yeah, you know what? I've got other notes here. Bear with me for 1 second here. Okay. Always have a backup plan. Also, that's good advice. Okay. Anyway, so as I mentioned, there are a ton of resources available to you on our website, which is www.bloomvoxstudios.com. And that's the link I gave you at the beginning to get my free 40-minute voiceover mini masterclass. I'm going to put it up here again in a second so you can copy it down. And if you want to go further than just that one class, there's also a year's worth of live classes that we've already recorded. You can download those and you can take them to go, or you can subscribe and you can get them all on demand. And when you do that, the subscription to my teaching series includes the full year of the live pre-recorded classes, which is over 50 hours worth. It's already done. And once a month, you'll get a live class with me and, when I can, a special guest here in the studio, where we'll answer your questions on camera and in person. Your subscription also includes our amazing multimedia newsletter called the Voice Monkey Dispatch. And it's a deep dive into my world with behind the scenes videos that we put together ourselves, stories from me and from my team, and everybody's an expert in this organization. They shared their experience with you too. I also offer product recommendations and exercises to help keep you moving forward. And if you want a more personal coaching experience with me, you can also apply on the website to get into my live coaching class. There are some prerequisites for that. I'm going to put up some links here to those 3 options. There we go. So you can see that there is an option available for all levels, depending on where you are. When we created these classes, I wanted to make sure that no one was left behind and that it was affordable for everybody. You'll also see, if you take a look around on the site, that I offer a standalone professionally recorded version of that guided meditation I mentioned earlier. This one has music by the amazing recording artist, singer-songwriter, and master musician, Ariel. And if you haven't listened to her, just at least listen to her music, then you'll have an idea of the quality of the music that goes with that. So look for the meditation on there too. And it's a really great way to visualize peace and to get you out of your head. Again, something for everyone. So I just wanted to say thank you guys so much for joining me in this webinar. And I really hope to see you guys in class soon. I do this honestly because I love to do it. And I'm doing these webinars because I love to do it. I really didn't want to do this at all in the first place, but I see a need out there for it. And there are a lot of people teaching voiceover who are predators. And I wanted to give you an option. I wanted to give you something that was a lot more affordable and real world, with stuff that, you know, I take right out of the studio. Many times when I'm doing these classes, I come right from the studio directly into the booth, and I can give you insight of what just happened a half an hour earlier in the real world of voiceover. So anyway, thank you for joining me. I really, really appreciate you guys being here, and I hope to see you in class very soon. Peace.